They don't love you. They love what you do for them. That's not connection. That's quiet self-erasure, and you know it. Somewhere beneath the smile, the silence, the automatic "sure, I can," you feel it. That you've been performing goodness for so long, you've forgotten how to feel free. You become the one everyone depends on, the one who never says no. The one who makes it look effortless, kind, thoughtful, available. But inside, your soul is hoarse from whispering, "Please, not one more thing." You get praised for being so reliable, so generous, so easy to love. But here's what they don't say out loud. They love that you don't need much. They love that you never complain. They love that you disappear on command. They love the version of you who doesn't take up space. And every time you trade your truth for peace, they applaud. You call it kindness, but your body calls it something else. Tight shoulders, sleepless nights, the creeping dread of another ask. You're not being kind, you're being compliant. There's a difference. Kindness comes from choice. Compliance comes from fear. And this fear, it's not random, it's rehearsed, it's a pattern. You smile so they stay, you nod so they don't get upset. You help even when you're falling apart because you've learned that being needed is the safest way to not be abandoned. But what if that's not safety? What if that's a prison made of politeness? You've been taught that no is a rejection, that boundaries are selfish, that your needs are optional. So you stretch yourself thin, hoping that one day someone will see how much you give and finally choose you back. But here's the paradox. The more you give without limits, the more invisible you become. They don't see your sacrifice, they expect it. They don't thank you for your yes, they just assume it. And somewhere inside, resentment builds like rust on a beautiful mask. Because even if they never meant to use you, they never asked who you are when you're not being useful. And maybe you stopped asking too. But now, right now, you feel it, the quiet rebellion in your chest. The ache of a life unlived. The exhaustion that's not from doing too much, but from being too little of yourself. So let me ask you, who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you're not performing? Who are you when the applause stops? You've smiled through pain, you've said yes through fatigue. You've shown up for everyone, except the person who lives inside your skin. It's time, not to rage, not to collapse, but to pause. To take one breath, one step, one moment of truth. Because the smile that cost you your voice was never love. And the version of you that earned praise for being good? That wasn't you, that was your survival mask. Now comes the moment not to rip it off, but to gently set it down. And remember, you were never meant to be everyone's solution. You were meant to be real. It didn't start with a big betrayal. It started with something smaller, a look, a sigh, a door that closed just a little too loud. You were a child, and children don't need to be told how to survive, they feel it. So when you reached for something and your parent turned away, your body remembered. When you cried and no one comforted you, your nervous system took notes. When you made a need disappear and got a smile in return, the script was written. Be helpful, be quiet, be good, that's how you stay safe, that's how you stay loved. You became the fixer, the peacekeeper, the gifted child who always knew what others needed but forgot how to ask for anything yourself. Alice Miller didn't define you by intelligence. She defined you by attunement. You read emotional rooms like weather, you softened sharp voices. You absorbed every unmet need around you and tried to make it okay, and the more you succeeded, the more invisible you became. Because they praised you for your politeness, your maturity, your selflessness. But what they were really praising was your absence. The absence of mess, the absence of need, the absence of boundaries. And it worked. You kept the peace, you owned the love. But the cost? You lost yourself in the process. You stopped crying when you were hurt. You stopped speaking when you were angry. You stopped wanting anything. Because wanting felt dangerous, so you learned to want what others wanted. To feel what they felt, to mirror the room until your own reflection vanished. And now, as an adult, you don't know what you feel until someone else tells you. You don't know what you need until it's too late. But deep inside, the child you muted is still waiting to be chosen, waiting to be heard, waiting to be told. You don't have to earn love by disappearing. The part of you that over-apologizes, over-functions, overthinks, it's not broken, it's brilliant, it kept you alive, but it's tired. And now your body is telling the truth you've been hiding, in the clenched jaw, in the restless nights, in the way you say yes but feel your chest collapse after. That's not consent, that's conditioning. But here's the miracle. Conditioning can be undone, scripts can be rewritten, masks can be laid down. And you? You are still in there, behind the reflex, behind the fear. You don't need to become someone new. You need to come home to the one you buried. And the first step is listening to the part of you that whispers in the quiet, I've been good long enough. I want to be whole. There's a moment after all the yeses, all the praise, all the giving, when something shifts. It doesn't roar, it doesn't scream, it whispers. You're sitting in silence, smiling again, agreeing again, and somewhere behind your ribs, it surfaces. I don't want this. At first you push it down, call it stress, fatigue, sensitivity, but it doesn't go away. It lingers, thickens, sharpens, until you can't ignore it anymore. This is the part of you you've been taught to fear. The part that doesn't smile, the part that says no more, the part that remembers. Carl Jung called it the shadow, not the villain, not the dark twin, but the self you had to exile to survive. The real you didn't disappear, it went underground. It shows up when you say, of course, but your chest tightens. When you over-apologize for needing space. When you laugh at the joke that makes you feel small. This is not drama, this is data. Your body keeps the score when your voice can't afford to speak. And the more you push it down, the heavier it gets. Until one day resentment arrives, not as rage, but as emptiness, as numbness, as the slow erosion of joy in everything you do for others. You tell yourself you're being kind, but kindness without choice is not virtue, it's self-erasure. The shadow grows in silence, and what you suppress doesn't disappear. It leaks in irritation, in withdrawal, in quiet despair. Because what you're calling being easy to love is really a life curated to avoid being left. But here's the paradox. The more you shape yourself to be liked, the less anyone truly sees you. And that invisible ache? That's your shadow asking to come home, not to ruin things, but to restore you. The part that says, I matter too. The part that says, I'm allowed to be complicated. The part that says, I won't smile through every betrayal of my needs. You were never meant to be agreeable at the expense of your truth. The world taught you to wear a mask. But masks are heavy, and over time, even the best one cracks. Jung once wrote, I'd rather be whole than good. Wholeness means honoring the yes and the no, the light and the ache, the love and the boundary. Because what you've been calling strength was actually fear dressed in gold. And what you've been hiding, your anger, your needs, your limits, those aren't flaws. They're directions, signals, soul compass. And when you begin to listen, you find something unexpected, peace. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of honesty. The peace that comes when your mouth and your soul stop arguing. When the smile and the truth finally match. You don't need to become cold, you just need to become clear. You don't need to stop loving people. You need to stop abandoning yourself to do it. Because the moment you allow the shadow to speak, not to control you, but to inform you, your yes becomes sacred, and your no becomes whole. They never told you that being good could cost you everything. They just handed you the script, be helpful, be easy, don't cause trouble, and somewhere along the way you started calling that love. But here's the truth beneath the politeness. You weren't taught to connect. You were taught to disappear nicely. And the lessons came wrapped in stories. Stories so old they don't need to be told anymore, they're just lived. Like the story of the Selkie, the wild sea woman of Celtic myth. She lives free until a man steals her seal skin, hiding it so she can't return to the sea. She becomes his wife, raises his children, smiles in every room. But every night she stares at the waves, quietly starving. And one day she finds the skin. She leaves, not in rage, not in cruelty, but because she remembers who she was before she was tamed. You are the Selkie when you look around at a life you built for others and realize your soul is still waiting at the water's edge. Then there's the fable of the camel's nose. A man lets his camel place just its nose inside the tent to stay warm, then the head, then the neck, until the whole camel is inside and the man is pushed out into the cold. That's how it happens. Not all at once, bit by bit. A favor you didn't want to give, a need you ignored, a boundary you bent. Until you find yourself freezing in the life you created, watching everyone else feel warm. And then the old parable. The man, the boy, and the donkey. They try to please every voice along their journey. Why isn't the boy riding? So he rides. Why is the old man making the boy walk? So they switch. Why are both riding? So they walk. And in trying to follow every opinion, they lose the donkey completely. Because when you let the world decide your path, you lose your direction. And eventually you lose yourself. These aren't just fables, they're reflections. You lived them when you cancelled plans for someone else's crisis. When you rewrote that email 5 times so no one would misinterpret your tone. When you said yes to dinner but felt your soul shrink before the first bite. You've been living by the rules of myths that were never yours. The myth of the selfless hero. The myth of the good daughter. The myth of the perfect partner. All of them dressed up as virtues. All of them slowly starving your truth. But myths can be broken. And here's what's truer than all of them. Boundaries are not the enemy of love, they are its beginning. Saying no is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of respect. And pleasing everyone does not make you lovable, it makes you invisible. The version of you who bends to every request is not more lovable, it's just more useful. And being useful is not the same as being valued. It's time to write a new myth. One where you are not the giver who vanishes, but the whole soul who stays visible. The one who remembers you were never meant to earn your place. You were meant to belong first to yourself. The first time you say no, not from anger, not from guilt, but from something quieter, it doesn't feel powerful. It feels terrifying. Your hand hovers over the keyboard. You rehearse the message 3 times. You shrink the words maybe another time. Sorry to disappoint, hope that's okay. But even with the edits, your heart races. Because for someone who has always bought belonging with self-erasure, saying no feels like breaking a law. And in a way it is. It's breaking the unspoken contract you made long ago. I'll be easy if you'll keep me close. I'll stay agreeable if you never leave. I'll be who you need if I don't have to be alone. But that contract was written by fear. And fear doesn't write fair terms. So you say yes again and again. And again, until your life becomes a list of obligations you never consented to. And then one day your body says no for you. The migraines, the shutdown. The chest tightness when someone says, "Can I ask you for a favor?" That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Gabor Maté didn't exaggerate when he said, if you don't know how to say no, your body will eventually do it for you. Your body is not your enemy. It's your boundary's final witness. The one who always kept score when your words were too afraid to. You think being generous makes you good. But what is generosity when your soul is running on fumes? What is kindness if you vanish every time someone else's need walks through the door? There is no virtue in a yes that empties you. There is no strength in the silence that keeps everyone comfortable, except the self who's quietly dying to speak. This is where the sacred begins. Not in screaming, not in slamming doors, but in the quiet, sacred pause between your exhaustion and your reflex. That moment where you feel the pull to say yes and you don't. You pause, you breathe. You say, actually, I can't. And the world doesn't explode. Maybe they're surprised, maybe they pull away. Maybe they call you selfish. But deep inside something unlocks, something ancient, something true. You didn't abandon them, you rescued yourself. And in that rescue, something else is born. The understanding that your time, your energy, your yes were never infinite, they were sacred. And sacred things are not handed out without discernment. You don't need to be everything to everyone. You just need to stop betraying yourself to keep people from misunderstanding you. Saying no isn't selfish. Saying no is a spell. A line in the sand, a sacred whispered promise, I will no longer leave myself behind to earn your affection. Because love that only survives your silence is not love, it's control. And now you choose peace. Not the fake peace of compliance. The real peace that comes when your words and your body are finally on the same side. When your no is not a betrayal, but a blessing. A boundary that protects the version of you who is learning finally to stay. This is not the part where you become someone new. This is the part where you remember who you were before the world convinced you to perform it differently, before you filtered your voice, before you rehearsed every word, before you believed that being loved meant being less. There was a time, maybe you've forgotten, when you lived without needing to be earned, when you cried without shame, laughed without checking the room, asked for things without explaining why you deserved them. You were honest, open, wild. Then came the edits, the shrinking, the reward for being easy, the punishment for being too much. You didn't become a people pleaser. You became a survivor. You weren't praised for your joy. You were praised for your disappearance. And now you are here on the edge of a life you've never fully lived. You've spent so long choosing others that your own soul has become a stranger. But strangers can become friends again, and that begins now. With the smallest acts of rebellion, resting without guilt, saying no without apology, laughing too loudly, asking for something even when it's inconvenient. Because every small act of honesty rewrites the myth you were given. The myth that said you had to be useful to be kept, quiet to be safe, selfless to be loved. But you were never too much. You were just around people who were too afraid of what you reminded them of, the freedom they had forgotten in themselves. The truth is this, you are not hard to love. You're just done performing for it. And what comes next is not perfection. It's presence, it's breath, stillness. The deep, aching joy of living a life that is yours. You no longer have to beg to be seen. You just have to stop leaving yourself behind. That's what it means to tame the urge to please, not by silencing it, not by punishing it, but by finally listening to what it was trying to protect. It wasn't your enemy. It was your child self bargaining for belonging. And now that child is safe because you are here. And you're not leaving again. So if this voice has met the voice in you, the one that's always been too quiet, let it speak, not for applause, not for permission, but because maybe finally it's time. Come home. To the life that doesn't need you to earn anything. To the voice that never needed to be small. To the soul that was never broken, just buried. And if it stirred something in you, share it. Not because we need to hear it, but because maybe you do.